Hi.
Hi, Amna. Salam.
Walaikum salam. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good too. Can you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure, definitely. I'm Arash Portar, or work with UNHCR as an associate education officer in the headquarters in Denmark, and I work on tertiary education with refugees, which is quite exciting. So it's a great honor to be here with you.
Thanks for joining us, and I'm glad that you can be a part of it. Jump right in. Alsafafoods is partnering with UNHCR to raise funds through their home delivery website, and they will donate it directly to UNHCR's Islamic Philanthropy program to help refugees with education. It's a really great cause, and it's just amazing to be a part of it.
Sorry, it's just I think the interesting technical issues, but here again.
No problem, no problem. So let's start with me asking you some questions. So yeah, let's start. Question number one is, why does working on refugee education matter to you?
Great. No, that's a very interesting question. I mean, it's something very close to my heart. Let me start by saying, as we all know, education is the most basic of human rights. And personally, I've been advocating for refugee rights to education for more than 10 years. And as someone who's gone through the education system with lots of challenges, barriers, pause, and struggle, I know that education is what gives us the platform to not only learn and shine, but also to stay connected, regardless of status, our ethnicity, nationality, where we are from. It shows us really the world beyond our past experiences and sometimes the limitation that is given to us by others. And having firsthand experiences on refugee journey and the stories that I've heard, I've seen how for many refugee children and especially, if not only for all of them, education is the only reason that they keep moving forward. And it's what really brings a smile on their face. And it's that light at the end of and really let them forget about their struggles, but also a hope for a future where they have tools and the resources to contribute to the society that they're living in. I've seen the smiles and the cracks of laughter with my own eyes, and the joy and the feeling when you're creating an opportunity or giving youth that they're able to learn or have access to education. Anything can replace that feeling for me, and that's why I'm really passionate about this, and I really enjoy the day-to-day work that I have.
That was a really good answer. Okay, question number two is, what is the impact of quality education for refugees and how does it contribute to their success?
Great question. I mean, when we want to talk about this, we should sometimes also picture when we're talking about refugees, they're starting to look for opportunities or education opportunities. They're typically in a new country, you know, if they're not born as a refugee. So everything is quite new. They are in a new country with a new language, new culture, new education system. And for many, is accessing to education is not really easy. They have to face a lot of additional barriers and struggles compared to their own age, from having more responsibility of providing for the family at the age of 10, working night shifts, really finding ways to navigate or help the family to navigate through a system in a new country, and to keep up with the expenses. And for many of them, education is not really free. And sometimes have to pay fees really for refugees that have left everything behind. And even for the parents, it's not really easy to be able to afford those high costs. So they sometimes have to give up fully studying because they end up working to make ends meet. But also when we look at it, education, it really provides them an outlook to the future. They're able to create their own pathway. They're able to exercise their potential and also create their own narrative on what they want to and who they want to become. And we need to remember that refugees, like any others, and like ourselves, have aspirations. And by providing them access to learning opportunities, we are not only ensuring a pathway to success, we are also helping them to impact their families and a broader community. And when you look at it, many of the refugees, when they graduate or when they have access, then they tend to give back to the community, and they tend to volunteer as much as they can, because it really creates a sense of belonging and sense of active citizenship, which really helps to create more solution for millions of forcibly displaced population around the world.
Okay, question number 3 is, what is your message to the Canadian Muslim community?
Great. I would say, firstly, huge thanks to our Muslim brothers and sisters for all really helping those in needs. We know that these are trying and difficult times, and many of the families would require a lot more support to sustain themselves and their kids. And as you just mentioned, by supporting the campaign that UNHCR and Safa is supporting, you will be able to make sure that many of the children would be able to go back to school or remain in the education system. And noting that whatever support you provide will count. And when we look at it, even if it's going to change one person's life, it goes a long way, because you're basically also giving a lot of hopes and aspiration to their families. I've seen many kids working at a very young age. I've seen kids holding bricks and saying that I wish I had pen in my hands to be able to draw my future. Many of the refugee kids to say and to talk about their dream aspiration on wanting to basically learn and get into engineering, nursing, becoming a pilot. And I think by providing that little opportunity, we would really make the dream a reality, and together to make a better world for them.
Thank you for sharing that. I really hope that people get inspired by that. Let's move on to asking the audience some questions. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask Arash, please comment them in the chat. And then we have some questions that we want to ask you guys. And remember that it's not about getting like an answer right or wrong. It's more for learning outcomes. So let's start. So question number 1 is, guess the number of forcibly displaced people around the world. And remember, there is no right or wrong answer. It's more just for learning. Okay, I think we have a shy crowd. No problem. The answer is 82.4 million people are forcibly displaced around the world. That's a lot of people, unfortunately. Okay, moving on to question number 2. How many of those 82.4 million do you think are children? Okay, so someone mentioned 50% and then someone mentioned 70%, but the correct answer is 42% of the displaced population are children. Yeah. Okay, question number 3 is, what percentage of school-aged refugee children do you think are not in school? I'm glad that you guys are participating in this. It really means a lot. It makes me feel that you guys are a part of this cause. Okay, so people mentioned 50%, 70%, and then 60, and then 80. The correct answer is almost 50%, so some of you were really close. I wanted to ask you, Arash, one last question, which is, how can the community get involved and help with refugees' education?
That's a really good point. I mean, there are many organizations that are supporting refugee education, but for us as UNHCR, we've been really different ways to make sure that we are able to reach out directly to yourself. And we have a campaign, it's called Back to School campaign, that you and Safa is supporting. I think by supporting the campaign, able to really change that narrative right now, especially because the challenges has really risen up quite quick. You would be more details. I think I'm going to share the links to find out how exactly we are doing and the numbers that we would really be able to support. I know also after my talk, we will have Becky, who is the head of education will give a broader image on the refugee education. But also I wanted to say on the numbers that you have just said, these are global numbers. And sometimes I can see, for example, someone said 70%, depending on context, sometimes 70% of the children could be out of the school. But globally, when we look at it, almost 50% of the refugees are not being able to have that. And we are hoping to change that together.
So around the lines of what Arash said, alsafafoods has partnered with UNHCR. They have their back to school campaign that they're running, and basically all of the orders that they get from their home delivery website, they will be donating directly to UNHCR to help support refugee education. I have my home delivery right here, so I'm going to unbox a couple of items with you guys, and then yeah. So it just feels amazing to know that this home delivery, like 100% of the proceeds are gonna go to help refugees with education. So it just feels great inside. So let me unbox a couple of things. So the first thing I got were chicken tenders, which is like a staple for school lunches. And then the next thing I got were chicken nuggets. Yeah, they make a great school lunch as well. And then I have a couple more things. Beef meatballs. Again, it's another great school lunch. But yeah, it just feels amazing to know that like the proceeds of this will go to like it will go towards such a great cause, and it just feels great to know that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining in, guys, and thank you so much, Arash, for being a part of this live. It was a pleasure to have you, and we learned so much from you.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And again, the audience for staying online and engaging. But I really appreciate the support. As you said, so even like $45 would be able to really bring a lot of essentials for refugee kids that would help them to stay. So thanks for listening, and I hope that it was helpful. I really enjoyed it myself.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And don't go away. I will be right back on with another IG Live with another special guest. So make sure you guys join that one too.
Thanks, Amna. Assalamu alaikum.
No problem. Walaikum salam. Hi, guys. I'm back. See, I promised I would be back, and now I'm back. Hi, Becky. How are you?
At last. I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience.
It's okay. No problem. Okay, so can you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So I am Dr. Becky Telford, and I'm UNHCR's Chief of Education. So I work in the headquarters in Copenhagen, and we provide support to all the different UNHCR country offices and to refugees globally.
Okay, thank you so much for joining in, and let's jump right in. So alsafafoods has partnered with UNHCR to raise funds through their home delivery website, and they're going to be donating 100% of the proceeds to UNHCR's Islamic philanthropy program, and that's going to help refugees get education. So I'm going to start by asking Becky some questions. I have the questions right here. I'm just going to read them off. So question number one is, what are the main challenges in accessing education?
Thank you. I mean, there's really a lot. And I think one of the big challenges that maybe a lot of people don't think about is the amount of time that refugees spend displaced. So the average amount of time a person might be out of their country when they're a refugee is 10 to 15 years. And so that means that refugees are having to start, all the way like from nursery school, primary school, secondary. And so if there are any issues in terms of quality, or they, miss a year because they're displaced or have to flee, then that has a knock-on effect in terms of how able they are to kind of move on to the next step in their education. There's very often a barrier around things like language. UNHCR is really keen for refugees to be able to access national schools with the same kind of ability as host communities. And that's for lots of reasons, one of which is about having a sense of normalcy, having a sense that, you're in a community that you can become part of, you can belong to. But that's not possible if you can't speak the language. And so language is an issue. There are also problems which are really specific to refugees. So things like not having certification. Maybe you've passed your primary school and you want to enroll in secondary, or you've finished secondary and you want to enroll in university. But if you fled, the chances are you won't have taken documents with you, and sometimes that can be really hard. And then the final thing I think is just the basics. All the things that it takes to have a child go to school in any country. So there has to be a school building, there has to be teachers, they have to be qualified and have textbooks and the ability to teach. And then the students have to have, uniforms and lunch to eat and kind of all the things that we prepare for our kids, right? And so UNHCR is there with families and communities where necessary, trying to work on supporting the provision of all of those pieces to make sure that refugees can access, not just go to school, but go to school and really learn and really succeed.
That was a great answer. Thank you. So question number 2 is, can you provide us with some context on the global displacement crisis?
I think the global displacement crisis is huge. And I think when you were talking to Arash about the numbers, it's tens of millions of people who've been displaced now, and those figures are only growing year on year. I think last year was the biggest number of displaced people since the Second World War. And that is really increasing. And what we're also seeing is regional kind of cycles. So, obviously Afghanistan is on a lot of people's minds at the moment, but movement from Afghanistan to Pakistan, from Pakistan to elsewhere has been going on for decades. I think what we're also seeing is displacement, which is really exacerbated by things like climate change. We do a lot of work in West Africa, for example, in the Sahel. And a lot of what's happening there is about climate change and about people no longer being able to access what they need just to survive. And so they're moving. And people are also being affected by conflict and crisis. So, Sudan is another example. Sudan is a huge refugee hosting country. It's in the top 5 with more than 1 million refugees. And the kind of displacement that's been coming into Sudan has continued. So, even in the last year, we had fighting in Ethiopia. And so people came over the border, and Sudan is having to host additional refugees. So, the numbers are really significant. But I think one of the things that happens when you have really significant numbers is that we forget that each of those numbers, each of those individuals is a person. And each of those people have exactly the same rights as you or I. And, if you have a refugee child, about 40% of refugees are children, then their parents want them to have the same kind of things that we want for our kids. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind, in spite of sometimes how overwhelming it can feel.
Yeah, definitely. Question number 3 is, how has the pandemic impacted accessibility to resources for refugees, such as education?
The pandemic's been awful for everybody, right? I think it's been something that has impacted the whole world, more or less. And I think it's one of the things which has come out of it, which is maybe a good thing, is realizing that we can't just help ourselves. You see it even with the vaccine or with kind of access to services. You can't kind of pick and choose who you deliver those things to and hope that you'll be safe, right? There's a point where we globally have to take responsibility for everybody. And I think that has really, and that's the same as it was in a lot of countries. Certainly my kids were out of school. I'm an educator, and they had a horrible time because I'm not a teacher. So I do think one of the good things as well has been an increased reflection on how important teachers are. I think on how grateful we are for schools and for kind of safe spaces and normalcy in the day-to-day that children need. But for refugee children in particular, partly because lockdown happened, within camp settings, children were just not able to access the kind of continuity of learning that lots of other children were, even in the countries which host them. So where there were, programs on the radio or on TV or apps for phones, they were very, very often not accessible. And we estimate that 70% of refugee children didn't have any access to continuity of learning during COVID. And so what that means is the potential that children will just either not go back to school because they have lost too much learning, or when they do go back to school, that they might not be able to succeed and to kind of move forward. We did some modeling. We looked at some data with the Malala Fund, and they made a projection that certainly for girls in secondary school, so adolescent girls, half of them might never return to school. And that's also, you know, during COVID, those girls had additional caring responsibilities. They had to look after families. You know, they may have got married earlier than they were planning to, and that really puts in place the potential for, you know, a crisis for the next generation. So a lot of the work that we do is about getting all of those children back to school, and really trying to focus particularly on the most vulnerable, but making sure that everyone, whether it's from COVID or from displacement or from a mix of factors, really has a chance to a brighter future.
That was really informative. I didn't realize so many things went into that. Like there was so many like obstacles for girls. I would just think that the same resources that we have, they have, but unfortunately that's not the case. It's really hard for them to get education, like overall, let alone like during a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the point on resourcing is a really important one. I mean, we had some stories come out in a report that we launched yesterday. And one of them was a Syrian family who are based in Jordan. And they considered themselves really fortunate because, you know, they had a phone. Jordan actually has incredible education, and the pieces that were put online by the Jordanian ministry were available to Syrian refugees who are largely in national schools. But that family had one phone. And so they had a schedule every day. UNHCR was able to support with data bundles, but they had a schedule every day. So everybody got the phone for an hour and did what they needed for an hour. And then the family kind of supported each other through it. And, you know, the idea of having my family and my kids and one device for us to share is kind of unthinkable at any time. And especially when you're homeschooling and working from home and, you know, doing your best during COVID.
Yeah, we don't realize that we have so many resources that many people don't have, and it's really unfortunate. Yeah. So question number 4 is, can you share an inspiring story about how education has really made a difference?
I think thinking of the COVID piece, I just want to share a story of a girl called Bahati, who was a refugee who moved to Kenya when she was really young. And her parents, I think, had not had so much of an education. They really wanted for her to be safe, and they really wanted for her to go to school. And she was able to go to schools which are supported by UNHCR. So she went for primary, she went for secondary, and actually then she was able to get a scholarship and go to university. And that in itself is a success story. She went to study medicine, she became a nurse. But I think what I like about Bahati's story is not only did she become a nurse, but she then volunteered to be on the front line when COVID happened. And she did it partly because she really believes in giving back, but she also really believes that it's important for people to see refugees as people and people who have something to contribute, something valuable to share and something to give back. But also what Bahati did was make sure that she was going back to the community where she grew up and kind of sharing messages and encouraging particularly girls to stay in school, saying, you know, look what I've achieved, see what you can become. And I think that is a continued inspiration. What I love about education is, you know, it matters to go to school, but it's everything else you then do with your life afterwards, right? It's where that education takes you, and who it makes you become, and then who you encourage other people to become. I think that's what's so inspiring.
Yeah. I didn't realize that education made such an impact on refugees' like lives and stuff. Yeah. So let's move on to asking the audience some questions. If you guys have any questions, you can comment them in the chat and we will ask you guys some questions too. And I would just love if all of you participate. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just more for like a learning outcome. So question number 1 is, what percentage of refugees do you think are enrolled in primary school? So primary school is grade 1 to 8. And if you guys have any questions that you want to ask us, I'm sure that Becky will be more than happy to answer them for you, so you can ask those too. The correct answer, a few people said 24%, 45%, 36%. The correct answer is 68%. Okay, so question number 2 is, what percentage of refugees do you think are enrolled in secondary school? So secondary school would be grade 8 to 12. You can just guess whatever you think the answer is. Okay, so the correct answer is 34%. Some people guessed 5%, they guessed 61, 60, 67. I really appreciate you guys commenting and participating. It's really good. Okay, so the final question is, what percentage of refugees do you think are enrolled in higher education? So higher education would be college or university. Okay, so we got an answer for 70. We got two people for 70%. Okay, so a few more people answered. Some said 50, some said 3%, and then another person said 40%. So the correct answer is 5%. You can see how the answer, like the percentage just keeps going down, and then all the way to like university or college, it's almost like 5%, which is a really low number, unfortunately. So thank you so much for participating in these questions. It means a lot. And now I'm going to ask Becky one last question, which is, how can the community get involved with refugee education?
Thanks. I mean, I think there's lots of different ways, particularly if you are in a community which is hosting refugees. You know, very often there might just be a small number of people, whether refugee kids in your local school, for example, just kind of thinking about how you treat people, thinking about how you speak to refugees, and the kind of messaging and care that you have for them in your day-to-day life, I think really matters, especially with some of the challenges we have in terms of the sort of narrative on refugees at the moment. But kind of more specifically, I think if people can kind of join in with the Safa campaign, then I think that's a fantastic way to support. I mean, it takes only about $45 to provide basic school support to a child going back to school. And that's all the kind of things that you or I would provide for our child to go back to school. So it's really meaningful. And when that money is donated to UNHCR, it does all go to support the families. And I think so it's a very, very direct way of helping someone as your own kids are going back to school, of helping other people's children go back as well.
Yeah, so as Becky said, continuing on from there, alsafafoods has partnered with UNHCR to raise funds through their home delivery website. So you can order online through their website, and 100% of the proceeds will be donated to UNHCR to help with refugee education. And it's just a great way to give back. We're so blessed with so many resources, and as the school season has started, like I don't have kids, but I know many people that do, that are sending their kids back. So it's just a great way to get involved and kind of give back. I have my home delivery right here with me, so I'm gonna unbox a few items with you guys. And honestly, it just feels amazing knowing that 100% of the proceeds is going to such a great cause. It's gonna help refugee children access education, and it's just amazing because knowing that they're going to grow up and then they'll be able to help more people and they'll be able to better their lives is just amazing overall. So let me unbox some of the things that I got. So another one of the things that I got is breaded chicken burgers, which would make an amazing like lunch. You can have it for breakfast, but I'm pretty sure parents would pack it as a lunch. And then I have this breakfast beef strips. This can be amazing for breakfast. You can like pair it with eggs, and it's just like a quick go-to breakfast. And then I have a couple more items that I got. So I got chicken biryani, which again makes a great school lunch, or you can just have it like anytime you want, after school, before school, whenever you want. And then the last product that I got is Shirmo. Sorry, that was a little noisy. So I've never tried Shirmo, but I wanted to get it just because I know like the cause is really great and it doesn't hurt to try a new product. So that's why I got it, and I would just really like to thank you guys for joining in. It really means a lot when you guys participate in such great causes, and thank you so much, Becky, for being a part of this live. It was a pleasure to have you, and you honestly taught me a lot, and I'm really and I'm pretty sure that you taught everyone else a lot too. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was really inspiring, and it's just been a pleasure to come on your IG Live and talk to some of your followers. So thank you so much for the experience.
Thank you so much. Take care.